Morning.
Not just
Hi,
good
everyone.
Morning.
throw in the guide link.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm on it.
thank you. I am pulling this up so I can see who is signing on. I'm feeling rusty. I haven't been on an online service in a while because I missed the last one and we had 2 in person close together. So it's good to see everyone on here. Thanks to those here joining us this morning. If you want to give a wave, say hello. Thanks for piecing together today's gathering. Let's see. Good morning to Sierra. As people are signing on, we want to invite you to grab communion elements. Communion is probably our pinnacle moment of our gatherings together, whether we're in line or in person. So we don't have an element with me. I need to go grab it.
I just right after communion, so I don't like to swallow and then have to sing.
Totally understand.
I'm going to eat an imaginary bite.
I saved my last bite of banana bread this morning and some coffee. Got that going on.
Ooh, nice.
I have
Go ahead.
I have a fortune cookie that it's broken, and I have some coffee.
Wait, we want to know what the fortune says.
Yeah.
It says something about like be aware of new opportunities in business. Whatever.
The comments make the proper joke there.
I have a pecan.
Yeah.
So I got to go find that. I don't know where she got it. Maybe HEB, but anyways. Okay, well, as people are putting their elements into the comments, I'm going to share a few announcements. Of course, we have the guide where you can follow along with our liturgy this morning. Matthew's going to, I think, put that into the comments. Oh, okay. I don't see it. But anyway, hopefully other people do. Okay, it's pinned, so we should be good. I don't know why I don't see it. Facebook is so selective with the comments it shows you. Like last week, Matthew and Fran and I went live, and if you have not seen that video, you should go back. I did pin it to the top of our Peace of Christ Church Facebook page. You should go watch that. But Fran, we were like watching the comments the whole time, and there were like 8. And then when we signed off, it was like 42 comments. It didn't show us any of them in the moment. But
why are we getting canceled?
The algorithm hates us. So speaking of that video, if you don't know already, Fran is getting ready to transition out of her role as pastor of worship and liturgy, and go watch that video and read her letter, which is linked in that video if you don't know what we're talking about. But I am sharing this to say that we have coming up this Sunday a space and a time to honor Fran. We don't have church on Sunday because it's the first Sunday, so no church. But the Great Transition celebration will take place on Sunday at 4 p.m. at the Lark and Owl Yard outside of Lark and Owl Bookstore in Georgetown. It's not Fran's last day. It's just the day that we're going to celebrate the transition and everything. So it is Fran's last day online, though. Fran's last day online, so... in terms of in this particular role, I'm sure she'll be, joining us, visiting as a visiting preacher here and there as she wishes. But she'll definitely still be in touch. Okay, so that's April 3rd at 4 p.m. Get that on your calendar if you are local. Lark and Owl, they have a little bistro that has an outdoor area that's in Georgetown. Okay. Get on our email list. That is the best way to know what is going on in our community. I'm not going to list it all, but we share an email every week. So just put it in the comments if you want to get on our email list and you're not, and I'll reach out to you, or you can DM us with your email address. Again, get your communion elements. And then finally, I just wanted to remind you that you can donate to the work of our community via Donor Box. There's the link there on the screen. It's donorbox.org/Peace of Christ Wilco for Williamson County. We appreciate your donations. We are completely community funded. We don't have any grants. We don't have rich aunts. We don't have organizations giving us money. So every penny comes from our community, and we try to use that wisely with a lot of transparency. So if you have any questions, you can always email us, but please feel free to donate if you can, what you can. And now that all the boring announcements are out of the way, we're going to move into this gathering, and Fran's going to help us do that.
Yes, I just have to switch my audio settings really fast. An hour. Just a little signal to our nervous systems that we're entering into sacred space right now.
Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
We would love for all of our Peace Kids to join us, and youth, if you wish, come gather close so Connor and I can hang out with you for a few minutes. We're going to do a short children's sermon. Today, Connor and I are going to talk about what is going on around us, and that is spring. And if you hadn't noticed, by the fact that your eyes are a little itchier and your nose keeps running, it is officially springtime. Springtime for us is a time of newness and fresh starts.
With these new spring things, I've noticed some of the newness comes from God and nature, like flowers and annoying pollen. Baby animals are often born in spring, and also spring is mainly the time that some animals wake up from hibernation and become more active, as well as birds like migrate back.
That's true.
And then there are some new things that humans do, like spring cleaning or just spending time outside.
Sure. Spring cleaning is kind of a fresh new start, right?
Yeah.
Not always a fun new thing, but new all the same.
Yes. Some other new things that are going around us are that we have some friends moving today. That's a new start for the Hanselkas. Our church also announced this past week that Fran will be leaving our pastoral staff, which is sad, but we have Jonathan, who is going to be helping out for a while, and that's a new exciting change for our church. Spring just feels like a time that old things are becoming new things.
Speaking of, in just a few minutes, Jana is going to talk to everyone about that word that you use, Connor. And that word is becoming. And what Jana is going to talk about is how sometimes we become something different without even planning on doing that, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like you might have a sibling and it's not even up to you. This is a good time to say, I love you, Line.
Yeah.
You can also become tired if you don't get enough sleep, or hungry if you don't get enough to eat. You become bigger, taller, and older without anyone's permission. It just happens.
This spring, we want to focus on the things that we can choose to become. We can literally start fresh and new, just like the nature around us this spring. It'll be like spring cleaning for our actions, or our ideas, and even our habits. So Connor, let's help our friends come up with some examples of ways that they can become something new this spring.
Sure. For example, I'm going to become more brave and outgoing by speaking up in class more. I have a tendency to listen, but not really speak in class unless I'm actually called on. I'm going to try to ask more questions and not be afraid to ask for help.
That's great. Joey already started this last week, right?
Yeah, I just sort of shared something that I did with the class for a starter.
That's a great way to take a step to becoming something new. For me, I would like to become more active again and spend more time outside now that it's not so chilly. I have a tendency to hibernate in the winter and kind of just want to cuddle up inside. And now that spring is happening, I just want to get outside and play all the time.
Other ways that you can become something new are to be more mindful. That just means you're aware of your body and what's going on around you. You just have to stop what you're doing and pay attention to yourself and others once in a while.
You could spend 5 minutes a day tidying your room this spring. That would be a great habit that would help you become less messy.
You can become more helpful by asking others if you can help, and do it without anyone asking you.
Sure, that can be tricky sometimes. You can become more patient by taking some deep breaths. Anytime that you feel yourself getting anxious or frustrated or upset, what we're saying is that this spring, right now, you can choose to become something new, because we are always trying to become something better. So let's think about that, and you might want to talk to your parents about it, about what you can become new this spring. Let's say a little prayer together. God, thank you for making all things new. Thank you for bringing us together today so that we can see all the newness around us and appreciate all that newness in your glory. We love you. Amen.
No, it's my turn. First, we're going to do communion.
So scary.
I'm just laughing because, I mean, we have to have those moments. We have to, or it's not us. So that was hilarious. Fran, I can still see Fran down there, and she is like recovering from being surprised. Anyways, Connor and Sarah, thank y'all so much for your kid message. Connor, you are such a thoughtful human and such a great speaker. So I hope we get to hear from you more whenever you want. So I'm going to lead us in communion now. And I just wanted to share a little life hack, if you will. Sometimes when the world is heavy, I put my AirPods in my ears and I turn on the audio for Anne of Green Gables. Now, I never read this as a child, but I wish I did. I read it for the first time in graduate school, and ever since it has provided me comfort in times of stress. I just love the character of Anne so much. Or maybe admire is a better word. She's eccentric and witty and creative, and I admire the way she is so utterly and consistently herself. She's probably my favorite literary character ever. If you have a favorite literary character ever, please share in the comments and why. But she is mine, and this week, I listened to the first book in the series for the first time in about 5 years. And there's this part that struck me. I mean, lots of parts strike me, which is why I like to read this book every few years. But there's this part that struck me this week where her best friend, Diana, says to her, "I don't see how you can make up such thrilling things out of your own head, Anne. I wish my imagination was as good as yours." And Anne says, "It would be if only you'd cultivate it." And she says it with so much love and so much cheer and joy, so that after this, they start a story club for them and their friends for the purpose of cultivating their imaginations, not just for Diana, but for their whole community of friends. Everyone who had an interest was invited. And it made me think about us and how we are often trying our hand at creating so many different spaces within our little community to engage our spiritual practices, to jumpstart our creativity, to learn and unlearn and learn again, to relate to those around us, just to be in community. These are all spaces to grow and become. And this communion moment is one of those sacred spaces. And specifically, it's a space where we cultivate our imaginations. Because truthfully, we are all capable of abundant imagination. And through our imagining, we are capable of creating realities that we long for. This communion space, this here and now moment, is always going to be what we make of it. Whether we're together in person, whether we're online, whether we have the official communion elements or the ones we made up, this moment is always going to be what we decide to make of it. So as we enter into it together this morning, I want to encourage us to imagine. Imagine we belong. Imagine we are filled and full. Imagine that it matters. This moment of make-believe, of remembering something until it's true. Imagine this ritual of hope-making, using hands, feet, all our senses. Imagine it into reality today, so that our imagining may hold hands with our becoming community, becoming heaven on earth, becoming Imago Dei embodied in you and in me. So with all of this in mind, I invite you to join with me. You can check it in the guide, or if you're in the service today, you can jump on with me now to share in this liturgy of communion this morning. God is within you.
God is also within you.
Lift up your hearts.
We join
in the beloved community.
Let us give thanks for the blessing of life.
together.
Together we raise our voices in gratitude.
So now I want to invite you to take your elements, and I just pray that whatever you hold in your hands and ingest now, water, wine, milk, whiskey, nuts, seeds, bread, sweets, whatever you hold in your hand and ingest, may you use your imagination to turn these elements into fuel, Christ energy, that which has the power to sustain our imaginations in these times. Great is the mystery of faith.
Christ has reimagined death, and we join him
in bringing heaven to earth.
Amen.
Amen. This time. It's my turn now. It's me. It's just me. And I got some lyrics that should pop up too. All right. Whew, that took me a minute to get over. I had to calm down. Okay, I wanted to sing for you guys something that I wrote that is on some level a whole summary of my message as a pastor. It's like, you know how pastors often will have a sermon that it's kind of the thing they preach over and over again. Everything is always tying back to this one thing. And this is kind of it. So I wrote this a couple years back. I haven't played it in a while for y'all. Here we go. We can see you. We can find you. We can notice and observe. Feel your heart and find your rhythm. We can be with you. We can breathe you in. To the curious and open, you are present in this moment. In the holy ordinary of the normal customary. In the simple mystery
a quiet mind and a grateful heart, we can learn to pay attention to the flow of love's intention in the holy ordinary of the normal customary, in the simple mystery of everyday extraordinary. You're found inside the daily grind, the movement of a common life. Slow down, slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down and breathe. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down and breathe. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down and breathe. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down and breathe.
Woo! That was beautiful. Fran, thank you so much for sharing some of your personal work with us this morning. I cannot wait to go back and listen and read and meditate on those lyrics. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to introduce y'all to one of our friends of peace, one of our peeps, Tiffany Cadenhead. This is a deeper look where we spend some time getting to know people in our community so that you can know the people in our community. So I'm going to let Tiffany introduce herself. We have 4 quick questions. The first one is not really a question. It's just please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, good morning. Gosh, that's like a hard act to follow with Fran. It's very beautiful. Yeah, so I'm Tiffany Cadenhead. I live in Wells Branch with my husband and my 3 kids. I've been in Austin for 7 years. We moved here after living in Memphis for a decade. I was born in Texas, though, so I kind of am coming back a little full circle. I am a vocal coach, a voice teacher. I've been working for 15 years with musicians, and I'm currently working on a certification to become an Alexander Technique teacher. So that's kind of a little snapshot of me.
Thank you for sharing. And we're glad to have you on today. I know this is a pretty intimidating thing for lots of people to do. So thanks for being here and joining us. So let's see. What's the second question? The second question is to tell us something about you that's kind of quirky, like something no one would know unless you told them. You can tell us more than one thing too. We won't be mad at that.
Okay, I'll tell you 2 things because one I feel like is always a little bit of a bummer when I kind of give it context, and then one is just really silly. So one kind of thing that pretty much no one knows about me unless you've known me for a long time is that I grew up in Japan, which sounds really cool until I tell you that my biological father was a missionary, and did not end well. Let's just say that. So people always think it's really cool that I grew up in Japan, but I'm like, but there's this whole context of that picture that was a little depressing. So, but I moved over there when I was 6 months old. So in a small prefecture in Japan called Higashikurume, back in the very early 80s, we were pretty much the only American white family in this prefecture. So I grew up, as kids do, learning how to speak Japanese fluently, and I'm appreciative, if nothing else, that I had kind of a unique childhood that not a lot of people get to have. Kind of a silly, quirky fact. I hesitate to share this because I don't want to actually do it on camera right now. But if you ever get the unfortunate privilege of meeting me in person, pull me aside and ask me to do this, and I might humor you. But I have an amazing Elmo voice. It is like eerie how great of an Elmo voice I can do, to the point I've considered like pimping myself out, like selling myself, like as a job. Like, you want to pay me, I'll call and talk to your like 4-year-old on the phone for 20 minutes or something. Maybe I'll do like a birthday message for a kid. Like, it's kind of eerie, and it cracks my family up, especially the baby. But we like to, I have a teenager, a 15-year-old, and an almost 12-year-old as well. So their favorite thing is when I do my Elmo voice, but I like rap a Kanye song or something. They think that is like the funniest thing in the world. So if nothing else, it like, when I pull it out from time to time, it makes people laugh. So maybe if you catch me in person one day, I'll do an Elmo impersonation for you.
Okay, well, I'm not going to pressure you today, but I am going to pressure you the next time I see you, because you just let it out. You just let the cat out of the bag, or whatever the saying is.
Let the lid off the box. Yeah.
Yes. How old were you when you moved from Japan? I'm just curious.
I was about 5.5.
Okay, so you had those younger years there. That's such a unique experience. Thank you for sharing with us. And someone get this lady an Elmo costume so she can get some gigs. Just kidding. Okay. Well, the third question is a bonus question. That means that the person we're interviewing does not know in advance what we're going to ask them. They had the ability to prepare for the other three. So this one, bonus question says, how has music, and specifically singing, impacted your spiritual life or practice?
Wow, that's a doozy. Gosh, that's a really great question. I think at different points in my spiritual life, singing has meant different things to me. And where I'm at now maybe is just totally different than if you asked me this question 10 years ago. I think the answer would be a lot different. But I guess if I was going to keep that answer really simple, I would say like overarching, like a history, my kind of like long journey of spirituality, that at times it's been a way for me to connect with others. As you all know, something about singing with other people, there's not another experience like it. And I feel like there's something really special that happens. And we could break it down and put on like our science hat and talk about like the nervous system and yada, yada, yada. But I do feel like there's something a little bit more unexplainable, a little bit more divine when you sing in a community of people, whether that's a spiritual community or not. And I think it can be a really powerful gateway into connecting with the divine, whatever that looks like, because singing is so vulnerable. I have a real hard time singing unless I truly feel, but I can't just open my mouth and say sing a worship song or something unless I really feel like it's something that's reflective of, like truly, genuinely reflective of how I feel. It feels too vulnerable and intimate to just kind of fake it. So I think it can be a powerful tool of connection with other people, a way to connect with ourselves, maybe like our most true selves, because it requires a lot of vulnerability and some walls to come down to sing. And it can also be a way to, connect with something bigger than us, whatever you call that. Because it really, connects more with your heart than, and with your mind, and with your body. It's like a very like holistic, whole person thing when you sing. So I don't know if that's a coherent answer, but that's my answer.
Definitely a great answer, an authentic answer. And I think a lot of people can relate to that desire for authenticity in anything you do, but especially when you're going to engage with the divine through such a vulnerable and powerful act of singing. I know that Fran is over here probably agreeing with everything you said. Y'all probably talked about this, but we love to hear it, basically. So final question, also sort of spiritual in nature, but what are you particularly passionate about right now in your life, your spiritual life? And we kind of know those. We kind of assume those things are one and the same. So
yeah. Well, once again, a really thoughtful question. I appreciate that you said everyone kind of dreads answering this. I feel that dread, but it's an interesting place because it's not coming from a like, oh, I don't have anything to say, or but because I feel like talking about spirituality, at least for me in this season, feels very raw. And it's not something I honestly have a really easy time talking about. So doing it in a context where in a lot of ways I'm a stranger to most of the people in this community because of the reality of the last 2 years and the limitations it's had on building relationships. So it feels really challenging to talk about with anyone because I feel like I'm not in a place spiritually where being excited about my spirituality is easy for me. I think I'm, in light of some, pretty huge trauma in my life and in my family this past year. I think spirituality it's a big gray area for me. It's an area where I feel a lot of just sadness and confusion about who that God is, along with that image of kind of who I thought God was before my life frankly blew apart. So I think I'm just in a space where I'm trying to be real and authentic with myself, but it's hard to do that with other people because, as you might know, most people who identify as a Christian have really strong beliefs about what spirituality should look like, what Christianity should look like. And I know that that's not true to necessarily peace, but people in my life who I would like to have support from or talk to, whether that's family or maybe some friends, that it's an interesting space when you're in a real gray area spiritually, because not a lot of people can go there with you and be supportive for you just because of their own limitations and blinders maybe. So it's been an interesting season this past year plus of dealing with the aftermath of some pretty deep trauma, including just acknowledging the loneliness I feel from maybe a spirituality that would have at one point I hoped would have given me more comfort than it does currently, and being really confused about what is the way forward kind of look like. So I say that with fear and trembling just because that's hard to admit to, and it's hard to share, be vulnerable and share that, and hard to share that in a spiritual context because I know not everyone has that perspective, and I don't expect everyone to understand either, and I honor whatever stage anyone's at, but it's hard to be in this season where it's real gray and I just don't know what kind of moving forward looks like. So I wish I could say I had something to be excited about, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I really want to thank you. And there's lots of comments you can go look at in a minute. Fran probably said it pretty well. I think you're in good company here. And I whether it's deconstructing or whether it's grief and loss or whether it's trauma, a lot of people here in this space are anxious about that third question because we've been, indoctrinated to believe that we have to have the answers and that we're wrong if we say, I don't know, or I'm not excited, or, and we're trying to unpeel that off of us as a whole and as individuals. And part of that unpeeling happens when someone like you is willing to say out loud, I have no idea, and I don't know what's going on, and that's terrifying or whatever. So you are not alone in that, and I know it's hard to share, but I think we're trying to normalize making that the true spiritual path as opposed to like the Sunday school answers. So thank you so much, Tiffany. And I hope we have some opportunities in the future to connect in person. We're trying to create those, and I hope that we can connect a little more. But thank you for sharing. You are very beloved, and you go check out those comments and be encouraged. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, good morning, everybody. I just want to say thank you as well, Tiffany. That kind of honesty and vulnerability. This is the kind of community where we can bring that and be that. And if it's not that kind of community, it's not a community I want to be a part of. So thank you. I have the opportunity to read for us this morning from the Hebrew Bible, Joshua 5:9-12. This is immediately following what's called the conquest of the Promised Land, obviously told from a Hebrew-centric perspective. If it's told from a Canaanite perspective, it wouldn't be considered a conquest, and Promised Land, it would be considered losing your home. So I'm always sensitive to that. I don't approach this text or any of the stories around the Promised Land with a bunch of triumphalism of look what God did, but I try to say this is a very heavy text. It could even be read as, in some ways, a genocidal text. So we've got to be very careful how we interpret it and things like that. And Jana, I hope I'm not messing up your sermon. So anyways, this is just after the Israelites have they left slavery in Egypt and they go to this new home. And from their theological perspective, look what God gave us. That's why they call it the Promised Land. So let me read the text for us. What I do like about it, and it occurred to me this week as I read it for the first time ever, it is a story of moving from dependence. God doesn't keep us in a place of dependence to kind of independence and what I would call mutual interdependence, where we are interdependent on the land and others instead of just being in a dependent position. So let me read the text for us, Joshua 5:9-12. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped there on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce from the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped falling from heaven the day after they ate this food that came from the land. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. Oh, I repeated myself, sorry. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate the produce from the land of Canaan. We hear the voice of God in the reading of these sacred words. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm sorry to say that the lectionary texts were heavy texts this week. So our lectionary text this morning, it comes from 2 Corinthians 5:16-21. And so from now on, we don't look on anyone in terms of mere human judgment. Even if we did once regard Christ in these terms, that is not how we know Christ now. And for anyone who is in Christ is a new creation. The old order has passed away. and now everything is new. All of this is from God, who ransomed us through Christ and made us ministers of that reconciliation. That means that through Christ, the world was fully reconciled again to God, who didn't bother to hold our transgressions against us, but instead entrusted us with this message of reconciliation. This makes us Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making the appeal directly through us. Therefore, we implore you in Christ's name, be reconciled to God. For our sake, God made the one who was without sin to be sin, so by this means we might become the very holiness of God. We hear the voice of God through these words. Goodness. There's a lot of heavy theology in both of those scriptures that were part of our lectionary text, and I could have gone a lot of ways with this sermon. Even with Matthew's text, it could have gone a lot of ways. And so, but these words from St. Paul's letter to the Church of Corinth about becoming a new creation, it always makes me think of springtime. And I swear Sarah and Connor stole my sermon. I'm just going to say that already. But this week, it feels like spring has finally sprung. Spring feels like newness to me. I love to see the green, new grass and the vibrant flowers that are now sprouting out of the yellowed, winter-worn land. The birds are fluttering about, and we're starting to see signs of life again. I know I'm biased, but I believe that there is nothing more beautiful than Central Texas in spring. And I'm really sorry if you don't live in Texas, if you don't get to see this, come visit us in person. It's beautiful. Take a drive down any Texas highway, maybe not I-35, but the other ones. Fields are blooming with new life. The bluebonnets popped up this week, seemingly overnight. We had a tornado and then boom, bluebonnets everywhere. And soon your Texas friends are going to be posting family photos in the bluebonnets with their kids. And if you're those people, please watch out for snakes. But for me, this is that sweet spot when I start to feel the relief that winter is over. That I can anticipate the coming heat of summer, but I'm still okay with it because at least it's not freezing, but it's not the heat of July. But this time of year, everything just feels like it's buzzing with life. The natural world that we live in, this planet, it never sits still, does it? It's always rotating and circling. With each rotation, our land becomes either light or dark, day and night on perpetual repeat. Each lap around the sun moves us through the cycles of life that come and go with each passing season. Spring is born, and it matures into summer, and summer fades into fall, and fall slowly dies into winter, and then winter rebirths into spring, all to do it again and again and again. Our earth is alive and always changing. It's always on the brink of becoming something new, becoming light, becoming dark, becoming awake, becoming dormant, becoming warmer, becoming colder. Clouds become rain, and raindrops become oceans, and oceans become clouds. Our world is just one big becoming. We've been talking about becomings for the last few weeks. Fran preached a beautiful sermon about expanding our consciousness of the becomings that God has initiated within us, and the healing and empowerment that we can experience when we take the time to ritualize those newly realized becomings. And last week, Aurelia preached about becoming aware of sneaky becomings that are happening often without our noticing, these small, unobvious changes that lead to shifts in our awareness of ourselves and of the work of God. So now that we're paying attention and noticing and being conscious of our becomings, I want to challenge us to become active in them. We, like the earth, are constantly changing. We're becoming something different than what we've been before. As humans, like the world that we live in, we're perpetually becoming something. Every single one of us is becoming something. In fact, we're becoming more than one thing simultaneously, whether we want to or not, and whether we see it or not. We're constantly undergoing multiple physical, emotional, relational, spiritual transformations all at the same time. We have these big, bold becomings and these sneaky, subtle, slight becomings, mundane becomings, and sacred becomings. It can be really overwhelming to be awake or conscious of all of our becomings at once. Our becomings are not always predictable or as cyclical as the rhythms of nature. But like the turning of the seasons or the rising of the sun or the waxing and waning of the moon, many of the things that we're becoming are beyond our control. And try as we may, we cannot change it. Because sometimes we become something without our choosing. The becoming happens to us without our consent. Most of these non-consenting becomings are natural physical processes that happen to our bodies, just like as they happen to the plants and the animals. Physical maturity happens, bringing us from childhood to adolescence to adulthood to late adulthood. Our bodies are aging and changing with each phase of life. We become older. Birth, then life, then death, and the time in between those transitions may be different for every one of us, but it's always in that order. I had a conversation last week with my little friend Cozy, who is oh so bright and wise beyond her 6 years of age. And she was telling me about how as she gets older, she gets less scared of things. Of course, our conversation, we were discussing the increasingly scary and maturing themes of Harry Potter, because that's what we do, and how one day she will be able to read and watch the later years of the series. And she says, "Yep, I can only get older. I can't get younger." God, she's smart. She knows, Cozy knows that some becomings are linear and only move in one direction, that we can't unbecome some things. No matter what the beauty industry tells us, we can only physically age in one direction. But some of our becomings are more of a spectrum, that we can move along the spectrum in positive or negative ways, back and forth. We become more of this and less of that. We become nearer or further from one end of the spectrum or the other. We can move back and forth along these spectrums based on our willingness to allow for change and whether or not we choose to direct our energy toward that becoming. We can choose to put energy into moving ourselves toward the end of the spectrum that we want to be on. We can choose to exercise and eat well and become physically stronger or more fit. Or we can choose not to exercise, eat poorly, and we move to the other end of those spectrums. We can practice empathy and become more kind. Or on the flip side, we can fall into apathy and become more careless. We can engage in acts of courage, like Cozy, and become less scared. We can feel weary and overburdened, and we can choose to rest and lay stuff down and become re-energized. We can move from disconnection to connectedness as we become more vulnerable with ourselves and with others. We have the ability to take hold of our becomings, either by action or inaction. We choose where we direct or withhold our energy, and sometimes our inaction is just as powerful as our actions. Texas music legend Willie Nelson wrote a song back in the 90s, and it's a simple song that packs a really lyrical punch, and it's actually one of my husband's favorites. And the lyrics go like this: "Still is still moving to me. I swim like a fish in the sea all the time. But if that's what it takes to be free, I don't mind. Still is still moving to me. It's hard to explain how I feel. It won't go into words, but I know that it's real. I could be moving or I can be still, but still is still moving to me. Oh yes, still is still moving to me." Willie knows that choosing not to do something is still doing something. We're reminded in our scripture today that through life, through the life and death and resurrection of Jesus, and through the work of the Spirit, divine energy has been spent on our becoming something new. We have been moved from one end of the reconciliation spectrum to the other. Reconciliation is a big word, but it just really means it's the process of becoming restored and attuned, righting the ship, becoming balanced and harmonious, becoming one, becoming the holiness of God. For our sakes, God, through Jesus, has already done the work of reconciliation. And our work, if we choose it, is to first become aware of the power of that reconciliation, and then to allow it to transform us into something new. I think that what St. Paul means is that we're not meant to be active, or we're not meant to merely be passive recipients of this reconciliation with God, that we're called to be active participants too. Paul tells the church in Corinth, all of this is from God who ransomed us through Christ and made us ministers of that reconciliation. That means that through Christ, the world was finally reconciled again to God, who didn't hold our transgressions against us, but instead entrusted us with the message of reconciliation. We're urged to participate in it, but not in the sense that we have to earn it. There's no need for that by the grace of God. But with our free will, we can choose to be co-agents of change, working with the divine in our own life and in the world. We can use our tools, our spiritual practices, to help us become more attuned and move in harmony with the divine spirit as she breathes in and around us. This is where we begin to experience in fullness the gift of reconciliation. When we notice the work of God in our lives and we allow ourselves to be transformed by it, the radical act of reconciliation, it actually reverses the natural spectrum. Old actually becomes new. I would say that if we're conscious, that is, if we are awake and aware of what we are becoming, to the transformation blooming within us, the newness that comes from the work of the divine, that we can use our energy to move us along our own spectrums of change, to allow the Spirit of God to change us, to become more like Jesus. We can use our energy to participate in the world spectrum and change it little by little. We can become ambassadors of that supernatural reconciliation that moves the kingdom of earth along the spectrum to become more like the kingdom of heaven. So on an individual level, I think it starts with some self-examination. And this morning, I just want you to ask yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat. I mean, you can if you want to, but I really just want you to ask yourself and contemplate, am I awake to the things that I'm becoming? Am I aware of the divine bloomings that are happening within me, both big and small? Awakening to these becomings can be exhilarating, or they can be terrifying. And I think the new buzzword around here is exilifying. Thank you, Fran. But either way, I want to encourage you to find a safe person in your life and share with them what you're becoming. Because I think that becoming needs some support. It needs community. It needs some encouragement. And speaking it out loud helps to take the edge off. I also want you to ask yourself, how can I actively participate and move along the spectrum towards my becomings? Where do I need to direct my energy? Do I need to ritualize it or find a way to honor the work of the divine in my life? These are just some things I want you to contemplate in the days to come. We won't be singing it today, but our dear Fran wrote a song a while back, and most of you know it. And in fact, it's our unofficial, but pretty official church anthem. And I'm not sure that Fran had St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians in mind when she wrote the song. You'd have to ask her. But I feel like her song beautifully encapsulates Paul's message, this reminder of our divine reconciliation, as well as our collective becoming ambassadors of that reconciliation to the world. May the life that flows from you flow in me. We're reconciled, new creations in Christ, becoming one with the divine. the holiness of God. May I be your voice, speaking grace and peace. We're becoming ministers of that reconciliation. Let us walk alongside you as you bring the world around us to life. We're becoming ambassadors, perpetuators, co-conspirators of that divine, life-giving reconciliation. So as we go into the world this week, I'd leave you this. May we take notice of God bringing the world to life. May we behold that which was asleep becoming awake as life springs forth in nature around us. May we recognize how the old became new within ourselves. And may we realize the work and the movement of the divine spirit in and around us. May we direct our energy as ambassadors, as the holiness of God, to move the kingdom of this world along the spectrum closer to the kingdom of heaven. Amen.
I think you're muted, Trey.
Sorry about that. I'm unmuted now. Here we go. Let's try that again. I'm Trey, and I'm going to be reading Litany for Lenten Rhythms. So I'll read, or you can join me on the bolded text. God, in this season of Lent, we are practicing a variety of spiritual skills, mostly involving paradoxes. Staying connected to gratitude amidst worldwide fear and despair. Embodying living in abundance with generosity despite economic difficulty. Celebrating our gifts while grieving our losses. We are learning that so much of the spiritual life involves paradox.
And holding
contradictory truths. We strive to be present and engage with the divine, and also aware of suffering. We are learning to rest in these tensions. We are learning joy. We are embodied in spirit. We are now. We are human and divinely imaged. We are people of faith and action. We know that impatience won't serve us well, so we let nature teach us slow rhythms. We breathe in, we breathe out. We practice gratitude. We surrender to trust. We are letting go of what we cannot control while tending to the word before us. We are relinquishing our claims to judgment and letting the story unfold. The story of earth, of humanity, of liberation, of God's goodness growing within and among us. It won't help for us to get stuck in resistance or unforgiveness. So we practice flowing, embodying grace. If we let it, Lent can teach us freedom. Even as we learn to put our minds towards love. Help us to learn well, God, as we celebrate the life we experience. Amen.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you, everybody that helped lead this morning. Jana, that was wonderful. We have such a deep bench, a deep well of wisdom in this community, and it continues to give me so much hope for our future. The work of this community could easily go on without us pastors, and that doesn't intimidate us. That tells us we're doing something right, actually. So thank you, Jana. Thank you, everyone. Sharon's asking, where's my bicycle behind me? We're in the middle of moving, so everything's packed up. Let me lead our benediction for us, inspired by Jana's sermon. I may have made a few edits while she was preaching. So I'll read the normal font and invite you to join in the bold. Oh no, now what pops up on your screen may not be what it's in the worship guide if you pulled that up. So your part actually is the same, so that's fine. I'll read my part, which is a little different. And that is, Lord, you are an ever becoming God. You sent your word to create. You sent Christ to waken eyes, hearts, minds, and lives. You sent your spirit to attune us to true power. And now you send us to be an ever becoming people in our world. Send us, O God, to renew the earth. Lead us by your spirit and your word. As your people, we now go. By our love, we'll make you known. People of God, you are sent. Go in peace for peace. Amen.